But I'd like to introduce Natalie Botha now. She's creative director of Kantar. And as much as we need the left side, we also need the right side. So Natalie, can you tell us, does creative radio make for effective radio?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Charlie. Great challenge. I'm sure Sanella will probably agree that you also need clients that can sometimes be a little bit brave as well when it comes to not just time. You need some bravery too. And it's good to see some clients being brave at the moment and taking a step out there. So yeah, so my talk is a brief one about unlocking effective radio, and it's something that I've spoken about for quite some time. But it wouldn't go down if I didn't just take a second to speak about the environment that we're all experiencing at the moment, which is this COVID environment. So Wayne actually mentioned a few statistics earlier about how radio is lifting. And we had a, I wonder if hopefully you can see it.
So Natalie, sorry,
yeah.
Brenton here. So we stopped your sharing just a moment ago so that Sanelle and Charlie, who were engaging, were visible. So if you'd like to share again from your side, then we can see your deck.
Sorry about that. Shared too early. Let me know if you can see me.
Perfect.
Let me know. Perfect. Thank you. So yes, so we're speaking about the current environment, about COVID, and Wayne was saying earlier how he's noticed, that it's not the case that, people have stopped listening to radio, and we're running a Kantar Barometer. Some of you may have joined our WebEx yesterday, and one of the points that we made on radio there is in that barometer we can actually pick up claimed usage of an increase of 30%. Of consumers listening to radio. And I just wanted to pause on that for a second, because I think what's going on right now is you've got your social media, and social media is fairly easy to hack. Turns out so are Zoom meetings at the moment, but social media particularly quite easy to hack, and people can put a lot of fake news in that environment, and people are onto that. It's more difficult to hack radio, it's harder to hack TV, etc. So people are going to their trusted, top of mind sources for information right now, and that is what you're picking up on there, and we can certainly see that with that increase in radio as well as on podcasts. So it is an important thing just to take note of, and we will also see, because this was actually done right before the president's announcement, so we're in the process of gathering the third dip of data. We'll let you know as soon as that comes out. I'll send a link to everybody. But I think back to the topic of creative, I think sometimes we need a reason to understand why it's important to focus on creative. And if ever you have, we call them bean counters, or people who say that marketing is not, it's a cost and not an investment, I think this is a great slide to show them. So if you take a look at what we've got here is we've tracked a whole host of brands, nearly 100 brands, and we've tracked them over the period of several years, from 2006 to 2018. And the thing that we found differentiated their growth in value the most was when they worked harder at getting strong advertising appeal. So if you can set your creative apart and make it far more appealing and attractive to our consumers, that's the thing that will get you the additional growth. So, and that's real data for anybody who has to deal with those conversations every day. I know that there's many of us that do. So I want to say that when it comes to any medium, regardless of what it is that you're dealing with, you must remember that it's like one piece or one ingredient that bakes this beautiful cake. And it would go amiss if you didn't have the ingredient. So if you think of your media strategy like that, it's worth two things that I want to keep pointing out on this, is that if you have a central connecting idea that pulls it all together, first of all, and then secondly, if you customize your content for each channel, we are far more likely to see stronger levels of success. And once again, I'm going to give you some data. These are the last two data charts that I'm going to give you, but just to prove the point on why it's important to have the strong central connecting idea. The first point is that we indexed campaigns that do have a central connecting idea versus those that don't. Those that don't, if you take a look at that, is your average of 100. And then the ones that do are sitting well above our index, particularly when it comes to associations that you're laying down with the brand. So you can see that you're driving stronger layers of salience, creating awareness for your brand, stronger message association or attributing the right messages to your brand, and stronger levels of persuasion and motivation. So ensuring that you're allowing your creative team the freedom to be able to have that connecting idea that holds everything together is pretty fundamental. And then the next point is around, if you can customize your campaigns to the medium, that's when we see the additional levels of success as well. So again, taking 100 on the left-hand side there as your average of all our campaigns, you can get 104, the index to 104, and you can see that those are the brands that engage with more than one channel. By this, I mean if you add radio to digital, or if you had TV and radio. So if you're including a multimedia strategy, you can tend to get stronger levels of success. Coupled with an integrated campaign, so in other words, that's when you're talking about your messages and your core message idea that is active across all of your mediums. And then lastly is around that customizing to the channel. And many conversations I've had, and I'm sure you have too, where we take our TV and we go, I'm going to create it for radio, or I take my digital and I'm going to take my TV and I'm going to put it onto digital because of time, money, and expense, etc. And it really is worth thinking that when your consumer, you take yourself as an example, you are in a different state of mind when you are flicking through Instagram to when you are flicking looking for a YouTube video. Your customer at the end of it is in different mind states, and they need content that is customized perfectly for the platform that you are creating for them. So that's just the one point. It's just making sure that you understand that it's one piece of your big puzzle, one piece or one ingredient to your cake, and that you're using it perfectly. The second concept that I always urge a lot of our customers around is this concept of, remember, the human brain and what it's capable of. And whilst we think it's capable of a lot, I would argue sometimes that South Africans do not work very hard to decode messaging. So what do I mean by this? So when I work on a lot of TV adverts and we test a lot of adverts daily, and the one thing that I see that goes wrong for South African advertising is the South African consumer really struggles to understand what it is that we're putting out there. I'm afraid they are very highly literal, which I have a very I've got quite a big opinion on. And Sanele, maybe one day you and I can have a chat about your idea of the radio apartheid, because I've got a strong opinion on the language as well. I mean, we're actually working to prove it, so it'll be interesting to talk about that. But if you think about the human brain, the one thing that it loves to do is it loves to set up relationships with settings and with human beings. And when you think of a radio advert, and you create multiple characters within a radio advert, the brain starts to lose emotional resonance as soon as we start to add more and more things for it to decode and places for it to decode. And as a result, we start to lose interest and emotional resonance. So as soon as we're placing vignettes, multiple characters, metaphors, and a fast pace, our poor South African consumer really does get overwhelmed with it. And our big ask to a lot of our clients is to carefully assess how many messages you are placing within your adverts. And that includes things like your settings, like your voices, and all the other various things. Everything becomes a message because you've got to know of everything that you've put in there. So that's quite an important one. The next one is around branding. So your strongest predictor of in-market sales is the fact that you can get your brand right. If you don't get your brand right, and if your consumers are attributing your advert to another brand, you're going to lose your opportunity to connect with them and lose opportunity for your brand to stand out there. So I would ask myself often, is this related to the category? So think of your most memorable moment within that advert. And actually that example you played, Sanele, was a good one. So the Vauxhall advert that you had there. I mean, you have to ask yourself, Was that it all created and related to the category? We took consumers on this huge big path, and at the end it was almost completely unrelated. So I agree with you there. It's important to consider the brand linkage within these adverts, and remember that it's linked to your ability to persuade. Our fourth point is on consistency. So I often see in boardrooms that we get bored of our content well before our consumers get bored. Creative wear out is rare. Media wear out is far more likely. So think about it every time you're changing it up. Ask if they really are bored, and if there are any other ways that you could use media more creatively to try and spread the message, as opposed to swapping out and creating different campaigns every quarter. Mixed messages create clutter in already a very heavily polluted environment. So aim as far as possible for simplicity and strong association with your category drivers. And if you can continuously push those within your content, you will see eventually your brand becomes strongly associated with something. I can't tell you how many categories I work on. Insurance is one of them, where there are too many brands that have no footprint amongst consumers' minds because everybody stands for the same thing, and it becomes quite difficult to compete in that sort of environment. So yeah, consistency. And my last point is a neuro, which is about knowing people. And it might sound like a funny one, but women process very differently to the way men process. So you have to consider what women are processing almost every single day. So first of all, let's talk about women. So we've got higher stress levels than men. We, particularly post-pregnancy and postpartum or post-delivery, we have very low levels of serotonin and high levels of stress. And if you think of how advertising has been set up, most advertising has been set up to present a problem to women. And that's just one extra thing that they have to process. And if they have to process more problems, they will start to shut down on their message. So a small example of this will be, like, what's for dinner, mom? It's a question that often we get asked and can sometimes raise our stress levels because we have to think about other things. So thinking about how we're setting up our problems, especially for women. What do they want to hear? Do they want to hear things like that? Do they want to hear problem, solution, and then resolve? Or how could we present an opportunity to create a sort of seamless role for your brand? So strongly understanding your audience and how they respond to different content. I can speak about men as well. So men, because everyone always asks, men post the age of 40 naturally lose dopamine response in their bodies, and they will go seeking for it. So after the age of 40, everyone calls it a midlife crisis, but it's because you're losing dopamine, and you will look for fast cars, and you will perhaps start things that create a response for that dopamine that you have lost. Fast cars, have affairs, what are some of the other things? Gambling, fast action sports, or anything to release some form of dopamine in your brain. So you will look for those things. And I say this because it's easy for me to stand here as a researcher and say, well, you should really know your audience well. And that's pretty obvious, but you should really understand the deep-seated motivations behind why your consumers respond to your brands in the way that they do, because that will help you understand the drivers to your category and what you should be saying within your radio or any of your mediums. But use them wisely, and try and create an environment where you're creating that consistency across. So yeah, so in summary, if I had to just quickly repeat everything that I said, so what we are looking for is just to be using the mediums wisely, using your media for the right reason across the channels with the right objectives. The second one is about understanding the human brain. So thinking about, are we overwhelming them with multiple messages? So if I throw 5 tennis balls at you, you're likely to catch one. Think about that when it comes to your messages and how many messages you're throwing out to your consumers. Making sure your brand is at the central part of your radio campaign, and making sure that nobody can attribute it to another brand. Be consistent, try and keep your messages out there as long as possible. And then, of course, just knowing your people. And there you go. Here's my thoughts. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Natalie.
Sure.
It's good to know that there's some research behind some of the things we feel passionately about. We've got a couple of questions for you. So the first one is, when clients' budgets are tight, which of course they are right now, often the channel approach spreads this budget too thin, and the campaign loses impact. Is there a sweet spot from a budget perspective to be able to afford a multi-channel approach?
That's a good one. So I could probably share with you some of our cross-media learnings so that you can take a look at what so before I say that, so the first thing I need you to consider at the start of every campaign is to be true to your north and your objective of what you hope for that campaign to achieve. Because if you don't do that, then you will get lost and you will create a plethora of irrelevant advertising on different channels. And I'd rather you be specific and create overachieve on one objective as opposed to trying to achieve many. So the first thing is stick to your true north on your objective. And then yeah, so then on cross media, so the other thing that we've got quite a lot of information on is, you know, no campaign's ever built the same way. So, you know, you will know that we're using different mediums all the time and they're all achieving in different ways. And so it's worth just going through and digesting some of those learnings too, which I can share. Yeah, sure.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. We'd like to know from a research perspective what your opinion is on the length of an ad.
So again, I absolutely would go back to True North here. So the 30-second advert, so I'm going to talk through TV in particular because I deal with a lot of TV testing. So, and everyone's being challenged right now. So there's loads of brands out there that are saying that they're not allowed to even create a 30-second advert anymore, which is quite heartbreaking for a lot of us. I think that when you look at the true difference between a 30-seconder and a 20-seconder, the honest answer is your ability to tell a story and your ability to get stronger levels of enjoyment. So now think of your brand equity as an example. I used this example a couple of years ago. I tracked the difference between a 30-second advert and what it was doing for a brand and a 20-seconder. And what we saw is the 30-seconder was holding up our brand equity. And equity, if you think of equity, it's love and it's associations. It was holding it up beautifully, the 30-seconder. We dropped off to the 20-seconder. And as you can imagine, the one thing that goes with it is the media pressure. So as soon as you drop to your 20, off goes your media pressure. So we dropped off on that, and you could see immediately the loss that you pick up on as soon as you drop into that 20-seconder. So I'm obviously speaking about a TV environment, but the same is true. There are objectives that attach themselves to a 30 and objectives that attach themselves to a 10, a 15, and a 20. And you've got to think through what you can tactically use them for. The 20-seconder for me is a reminder. It's a reminder at the end of the month, or it's a boost in the middle of the month to just try and remind people of your brand out there. It's not about building love. And often the way that we try and design it is there a way for us to dovetail with the two? So you create a 70-30, or you can create a plan that allows both of them to support you in your objective. But yeah, it's a big question. We get it a lot, and there's a lot of science to it as well. So yeah.
Thanks, Nat. Maybe what we can do is attach some of that science to the presentation hereafter.
Sure.
Because it's definitely a hot question at the moment.
Yeah. For sure.
Cindy Diamond from Media Mark asks, what do creative, and you mentioned this earlier at the beginning of your talk, where you said that clients are getting braver, and they need to be brave. What do you think creative agencies need from media owners to help encourage clients to be braver?
That's a good one. So probably evidence and case studies. So wherever possible, if you see your brands doing this and being brave, we've got to document it and we've got to share it. We've got to share and show that it works. So obviously I was also at Cannes, I think it was 2 years ago, and the cases of bravery there are exceptional, and I don't think that they reach enough people when they come back from Cannes. So we should be trawling through those cases. We should be measuring them, and we should be showing how they work. So it's not one case for a creative person to stand up and go, look at this beautiful piece of artwork that was created. It's about going, look at this creative, look at the response it got in market. Now, come on, client, why aren't you joining in, and let's do something like that? Obviously, not in a Me Too way. It's got to be done individualistically. But I was just, it's a small point, but I wrote a piece on COVID and creative in COVID at the moment. And my one risk, or just a thought for those brands out there who are associated with being a staple, or something that's in the cupboard. So if you go to your cupboard right now, chances are that you see a lot of noodles and a lot of tinned beans, for example. And the risk with your brand being in this environment is that it gets associated with tough times, and your tastes get associated with this time. Now, brands that are tinned beans, so if Tiger Brands is on the line, we should be thinking right now about how we are creating conversation with our customers about how to jazz up those baked beans, so that it's not just baked beans on toast every day. We should be thinking about 3-bean salads and how to create an innovative approach to our brands, and therefore driving consumption because they want to and not because they have to. So this, you got to think of all. I want people to think creatively in their own categories and not copy what happened at Cannes. We've got to. That's where our creatives come in. They're good at that, not me. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.